Happy Thursday, Savage Universe denizens. I'm not JM DeFogie. I'm Christopher Landauer, and I am here with the prolific Travis Legg of Aegis Studios. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's get into this. I mean, lengthy. When I say lengthy, you have like almost like between 400 and 500 credits to your name on Drive Through RPG. So before we get to your publishing side, just with that in mind, how did you get into RPGs? What was your original fix?
Oh, so I was born and raised in Mauston, Wisconsin, which is probably about 45 minutes north of the Dells, about 2 hours away from Lake Geneva, give or take. My older brother.
So the Holy Land.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, my older brother became very enamored with Dungeons and Dragons when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And because I was a younger brother, I wanted to play. I was always up in his face until he let me. And our first dungeon master was my mom. So yeah,
Wow.
I've been playing since I was a child with the old red box.
So that's crazy. I mean, one, especially given the time period, what a mom RPG player, let alone game master. But two, I don't know too many people who in the initial round of like exposure to what's typically D&D, right, or the first generation RPGs had a parent involved. That's pretty cool. What was that like?
Yeah, it was neat. I mean, my mom. So my grandparents lived with us, and my grandparents, though they were no longer practicing, had been Seventh Day Adventists. So they were a little. They weren't totally bought in on Satanic Panic, but they were like on the fence, like, is this okay? And so my mom, in an effort to make them less stressed out, basically was like, well, I'll just read all the books and I'll just run the game so that we know that it's not, you know. And
That is epically cool, sir.
yeah, it was pretty neat. It was pretty fun. So yeah, I owe my mom and my brother for this career choice. And then it was so weird how the tables turn over time. When I was like 11, the next game that I really got into actually was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness.
Nice.
Um, but in
Back
the
in
end,
a brand new Redux edition from.
which I am eagerly awaiting my hardcover copy of. Um, but yeah, in the interim, my mom and dad had gotten divorced. My grandparents had moved out. My mom had started seeing another guy, and he was very much like, I don't want that devil stuff in my house. I was like, it's Ninja Turtles. What are you talking about? You know? So that was part of it's part of a chain of events that led me to moving to Rockford, Illinois when I was 13 to live with my father. And this was the early 90s. And that was when I went into there was a McDonald's right next to my school. And I went into McDonald's one morning, and a very dear friend of mine was reading a little purple book with a golden prime symbol on the cover, Mage the Ascension. And that was it. I was hooked. The World of Darkness became my drug of choice for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is awesome. And you got, I mean, we'll get to Scarletlands in a second. So we've got some Onyx
Sure.
Path, goodness. Before that, how did you find Savage Worlds? What was the first time you ended up playing Savage Worlds or running Savage Worlds?
So that friend of mine, our high school group was very much into just a ton of games. I mean, we all kind of would gravitate back to World of Darkness eventually. It wasn't until like near the end of high school where I started to really get involved. I did a long stint where like DC Heroes was pretty much the only thing I ran, which is also recently had a reprint Kickstarter. But that group of friends, it was like 4 nights we'd be doing, World of Darkness. And on the 5th night, somebody would come in and be like, can we do something? Can I run some Shadowrun? Can I run Rifts? And Deadlands came about through that. And that was my introduction to it. And I loved it at the time. But then it was probably a couple of years before I engaged with it again. I found, when I had started actually publishing, was the next time that I really engaged with it. Because I'm always looking for new systems to play with and things like that. And I had been under the previous, whatever the previous license was before the ACES program. Because I thought it was a cool system and I wanted to sort of expand what I was doing. Because when I first started publishing, it was primarily OGL third edition stuff.
Yeah. So how did you get into that? What was the first? I mean, going from enjoyer, aficionado player to finding industry contacts, putting out material. Was the OGL kind of your initial entry into it, or how did you get started in publishing?
It's kind of funny. My former business partner, Aegis Studios is my company, and when we started, I had two business partners. And we used to refer to ourselves as the senior partners because Angel was on at the time. But we had this cool idea for an urban fantasy game called Contagion. But we just didn't know what we were going to do system-wise. We were playing around with this idea and that idea, and then we heard about the open game license. And we were like, we can just make it work for D&D. Like, that'll be easy, right? It wasn't. But that was what we wound up doing. And so our first edition of Contagion was just using the OGL. And that also drew me into my first contact with Scarlands, because when the OGL came out, the Player's Handbook was out and the Dungeon Master's Guide was out, but the Monster Manual had not yet come out yet. And as I much later discovered, because I now work at Onyx Path with one of the founders of White Wolf, basically they dropped everything when they saw that there was going to be like a 8-month window between the DMG and the Monster Manual. And they're like, we're going to make our own Monster Manual. And that was Creature Collection 1. And that's how Scarred Lands was born. So a lot of the monsters in first edition Contagion book are reskins of the open game content that was in Creature Collection. So it's really bizarrely cool, full circle to now be going through and translating, in some cases, some of those very same monsters over to Savage Worlds.
Yeah. So do you have any advice for folks? I mean, because I think, I like to think that these Savage Worlds, fan and swag and ACE programs are a great way of getting into publishing and starting out a career. But you've obviously worked with multiple big names in the industry and are still getting paid. Do you have any just advice on anything about you? Because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are kind of curious on, can I make this a living? Can I make it a serious hobby? Is it who you know? Is it, anything you can throw out there is kind of a tidbit from someone who's, one, been doing a lot of it, but two, doing some of the more interesting things like doing licenses and approaching people about someone else's IP. So any tips you got?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I know it sounds kind of flip, but like, don't plan on doing this for a living. This is a hard thing to do as your primary source of income. That can be a nice goal to work toward, but like it's only been the role-playing industry has only been my primary source of income for about 6 years now at this point. Yeah, I did a stint of 10 years as an independent filmmaker, which is a much more punishing industry financially. I quit because I got tired of every 18 months having my heart ripped out and shown to me. It's a hard.
That's just a lot more begging for money.
A lot more begging for money and a lot less making money when you're done with your project. Yeah. It's really like, wow, I did all this and I made nothing. That's weird. It's wild. But what I would say is, first of all, start with your community content. Start with your swag type stuff. There's a lot of the work has been done for you in terms of the art that's available, in terms of the layout materials that are available, and you have a wealth of information at your disposal in terms of templates and resources and also just reference material. You can look at how the existing books are made and sort of, apply that to what you're doing very easily. So that's my advice, is to find, a community content program or several community content programs and sort of cut your teeth on those. And if you can build a following in the process of doing that, great. That's awesome. And then from there, once you have some of that stuff under your belt, maybe start, sending out inquiries to companies. I know a lot of companies have either submissions guidelines or at least a contact email on their website. But when you can show that you've got 20 community content books that you did on your own, that nobody helped you, you just decided to make something from nothing, even if they're not that great, that shows that you have the commitment. And, a lot of companies would rather work with somebody who has the commitment but needs a little refining than somebody who is incredibly talented, but they never know they exist because they're too, busy, lazy, whatever, to finish a project. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I mean, meeting deadlines and being easy to work with are paramount, right? Because it's, even at a company like Pinnacle, which has, almost infinite future looking at like things we want to publish, there isn't the ability to deal with difficult folks. It's like maybe once, but when it's there are so many other concerns. Like we were actually having an interesting conversation, in the pre-show about all the concerns over things that you don't think of as like, hey, I'm creative, I have an idea, I want to do this. When you have a company of a certain size or an IP of a certain quality, there's suddenly concerns about like, hey, what would Hollywood look about this? Or there's just all these other little things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. It was little to do with your talent as a writer or your history or your resume in the industry, and much more to do with like, this needs to fit within a larger scheme of what this IP is and what it can do. And there's a lot of little things like that. So one, it's a small industry. Two, everybody's a creative. So there's like my favorite thing is like, I just want to be an idea guy. It's like everybody's got to be an idea guy or girl or whatever.
Right.
There's not, no one gets paid to just have cool ideas and make other people do it. Right. It's like it's very involved on,
No, if you have like a pile of money and you want to have cool ideas and hire other people to do them for you, then cool, that's awesome. But unless your aim is to bankroll your cool idea, nobody cares. And I mean that in the nicest way.
It's very true. Yeah, no one's going to pay you to be idea guy. You can pay other people if you're idea guy, but that's how that works.
100%. And being a team player is super important. Being able to mold yourself, because different companies have different cultures, they have different styles. If I'm writing a Savage Worlds release, I use a different style of writing, a different approach than I do when I'm working on something for, say, Curseborn, which for Onyx Path, right? They're different games, they have different needs, the voice is different. So being able to be flexible and learn those different voices, that's another reason why I recommended multiple community content programs to new creators. But you were going to say?
No, excellent advice, sir. Excellent advice. So let's dig into the what was your first release for Scarred Worlds? You mentioned a little bit, but give us kind of the history of like, what is Scarred Lands? Like, give us a little history on what you mentioned a little bit before about the OGL and the but what's the elevator pitch on what players can find when they're approaching Scarred Lands?
Sure. So, like, in terms of the setting, Scarred Lands is a post-apocalyptic fantasy setting. 150 years before the start date of the game, there was the end of the Titans War or Divine War. It's called both. That sort of bounces around depending on who you're asking. But it was effectively a Titanomachy as presented in like Greek Roman myth, right? The gods rose up and defeated the Titans. A lot of times people will say slew the Titans, but that's a bit of an over exaggeration, as we'll get into a little bit as I explain it. But so you have a world where, because the Titans couldn't be killed, many of them have been imprisoned, and some of them have just been incapacitated and left. So, like, for example, on the eastern coast of the continent of Gelspad is an ocean that is now called the Blood Sea. And the reason it's called the Blood Sea is because the Titan Kadum had their heart ripped out and then were chained up and thrown to the bottom of the sea, where they still lie bleeding, and it has turned the entire sea red with their blood. There's Gauntlet of Spiragos is a reference to a lesser titan named Spiragos, and I don't want to spoil anything, but we'll say that Spiragos's activities are a direct. They provide a location.
Yeah, no, the Valley of Flies is, when you read the origin of the Valley of Flies, it's kick ass. I'm like, oh damn, that is really good.
Yeah, and the whole setting is stuff like that. The Gauntlet of Spiragos takes place in a region known as the Fangs Fall Peninsula. The reason it's called the Fangs Fall Peninsula is because when they were fighting the Titan Garak, the glutton, the gods ripped his teeth out and threw them out of his mouth. And when they landed and made a mountain range. That's the Fangs Fall Mountains. So like that's the very like fabric of the landscape is affected by these titans and by their the remnants of that war. The other cool aspect of the Titans War is if you're playing a particularly long-lived character, for example, like let's say you're playing an elf, it's not impossible that you fought shoulder to shoulder with a god, because the gods were on the ground in the dirt with people. So an elf or a dwarf, you might have fought next to a god. As a human or a more short-lived character, you might have a family heirloom. Like, oh yeah, this is the sword that the god Corian blessed and then tossed to your great grandpa, and at the Battle of such and such hill. So this is all very recent. It's all within living memory. And it also, I see we've got a Blood Reaper up on the screen. The Titans have also, because of the way they were destroyed and their corruption, they have creatures they created, but also the remnants of their destruction has mutated other creatures as well. Big example of that is there's a big forest in the middle of the continent of Gelspad that was called the Broadreach Forest before the Titans War, and it is now called the Hornsaw Forest because when the Titan Mormo was disemboweled there, her blood soaked into everything. And one of the things it did was it corrupted the Broadreach unicorns, these beautiful, majestic creatures. And their unicorn horn grew serrated and pointy and sharp, and their body grew muscular like a Clydesdale, basically. So now they're called Hornsaw unicorns, hence where the forest gets its name.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, I love. I mean, there are several other major kind of IPs who kind of use that like you are playing in and around like the corpses of gods or the whatever, and like day after Ragnarok, you've got like the world snake, and you're kind of delving in to go get the magics and coming back out, and there's some vast time differences between like the age of the gods, and so the fact that this one is like the gods are still very much in memory. There's rapid change happening because of their presence. It's really, really interesting. So, Blood Reaper was the first thing you put out. We put the link in the chat, folks who want to go check it out. I mean, under like $2 to pick that up. So that's a creature feature. Tell us about the Flesh Corruptor.
So the Flesh Corruptor, one of the Titans, Churn, their focus was on disease and pestilence. And so they created Flesh Corruptors as these avatars that would go about and sort of insinuate themselves into like, leper colonies or beggar populations, and then just be a typhoid, basically just spread everything they can. But one of the things that I'm trying to do with the creature profiles, which is a monthly release that we're going to be doing for at least the next 2 years, every month we'll get a new creature. I'm trying to also include a relevant, either like relevant story beats for that creature or relevant game mechanics for how that creature that relates to that creature in the larger world. So like with the Flesh Corruptor, when you pick it up, not only do you get this creature that is sort of this insidious plague rat, effectively, it also because they're disease carriers, there's a list of diseases that are provided in the PDF that you can get from the Flesh Corruptor, but also they include, description of how people might normally get them as well. And some of those things will be showing up in other games as well too. So it's very, you pick that up It's $1.95, but now you've got all these different diseases. You could use each one as a plot seed. If you're playing a group of holy adventurers who are trying to like cleanse a land of disease, you've got 10 new enemies for them to fight, along with the one actual like monster.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I think doing creature features and other kind of small, relatively inexpensive releases is a great way of kind of building an audience and showing folks, one, like part of like the publishing thing is just learning the skills that either you need to pick up as a publisher to save yourself money, like layout, and even just like licensing art or figuring out how to use people's art packs to your advantage and where to fit in. And I think that's those are good skills. But also just figuring out like what you don't want to do or can't do, and what you need to like hire out for. But like doing small things, like you touch on all the little bits of like the learning curve of what you need to be a publisher, right? Like it's getting a good creative idea, doing the writing, doing the editing and the copy editing of your writing, putting it into layout, getting a final PDF produced, interacting with the website, like learning Drive-Thru-RPG is its whole thing all on its own. Right?
Sure.
Like, how to upload to it and make sure that you're responsive to comments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then marketing and then feedback and building an audience and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean the really like you're doing the right things on getting this out. But the cool thing is the Flush Corruptor was very recent, just out last week for GM's Day. So yeah, there's a GM's Day sale over there. You just want to go to Drive-Thru-RPG and check out the GM's Day sale. But oh man, the both of those little releases, again, smart move. The very last page of both of those are a marketing piece for the Gauntlet of Spiragos, which is pretty impressive. It's a chunky release. So you've hinted at what's going on here, but let's dig into it a little bit and tell us what else is going on. And I think it's cool art, love it. But if you look at like the table of contents, the numbers go up to what, in the 70s or 80s. So
it's 77 pages.
77 pages, nice. That's a pretty
it's, I guess I would call it an enhanced jumpstart, right? Because instead of it just being like, it is very much a self-contained story. It is, you get some information, you go do a thing, story over. But it covers the journey to do that. It covers the various different elements of it. So you could really run this as about 4 or 5 sessions. There's a thick enough, dense enough collection of material in here. And to reflect that, there's places in there where it suggests giving an advancement. And then in the back 20 pages of the book or so are kind of a precursor to the player's guide. It's got everything you really need to know about the setting in terms of system-wise, has the languages, it covers the setting rules that are available. It talks about the culture packages that we're using, and it provides a collection of ancestries and how they function in the Scarred Lands. And then, and this is one of my favorite things about this book, we have 6 pre-built characters that are drawn from that material that are ready to go, ready to play, and they have recommended advances in them. So literally, if you've never played Savage Worlds or Scarred Lands before, you go grab your Savage Worlds core book, you go grab Gauntlet of Spiragos, you have a full 5 session campaign right there. Bang, everything you need.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. The so what are the extra kind of challenges of going from adapting characters with very similar focus to bringing something larger like a 77-page product to market? I mean, are there other considerations? What other kind of skills have you kind of had at home to kind of bring something else larger like this to market?
For sure. So one of the things that is interesting about this particular project and this particular license is Scarred Lands is a setting that exists and lives and breathes in the Dungeons and Dragons space. So I'm converting things that already exist rather than coming up with it from whole cloth, which has a whole different batch of challenges, right? I know that the Savage Worlds fantasy design ethos is not generally quite as like you go in a dungeon and you kick a door in and you kill a monster and take its thing and then you level. That's not quite the beats that Savage Worlds is designed to thrive under. So how do I take material that might have been designed in more that fashion and make sure I'm honoring that material while also honoring the way that Savage Worlds just generally handles storytelling. And also, like, where were there places that maybe in the initial material either weren't fleshed out or were sort of left to the GM to decide, places where maybe they said, oh, you can go grab a monster out of the monster manual or something like that. Well, how can I refine those and own those moments and take those to really let the setting shine? There's a point in here where the characters, if they know a certain thing, if they make a certain check to know a certain piece of factoid, they can then potentially evoke one of the gods to help them. Not like God doesn't show up and just handle your work for you, but like a prayer that may offer some boons to them as they go in. And again, I'm caging it a little bit because I don't want to spoil much. But there are rules for like what happens when you pray in a setting where the gods might show up.
When there's tangible evidence of them existing, it's much harder to be an atheist when they can show up and like kill you or torture you too. It's like
right, 100%.
Atheism in the Scarland. Margaret, they show up. Yeah, Margaret, I'm right effing here. Let's go.
Yeah, atheism in the Scarlands is more along the lines of either like the gods, sure they exist, but they're all jerks, or there's one continent in Scarlands, the northern continent of Fenrilik. It's isolated. It's a frozen place. And most of the people there don't believe that the Divine War ever happened. They're like, what are you talking about? I hunted this morning. Therefore, the Titan Reinrook must still be around. Otherwise, I couldn't hunt. Like they just don't, it's not within their lived experience. And the war didn't actually show up on their stoop very much. So it's an interesting little piece of trivia about the world of Skarn.
So for the audience, here's some ravenous hounds, thus the Landauer subtitle. You run across them, and then here I'm not gonna go to the next page because it'll hint at how the chasm developed. But oh my god, Chasm of Flies, really really cool. We do have a question from Vankel. Vankel asks, was there any difficulty or ease when making the monsters using the Savage Worlds rules?
So I don't know where I would rate it on the difficulty scale, but there are a lot of the things that they can do that require either like writing a new rule or tweaking an existing rule in a way that maybe it's not normally applied. And that part to me is fun. That's the most fun of game design to me is when I get to get in there and rattle around with mechanics and make new cool things happen. I think one of the things that I really had to keep in mind, and I would recommend anybody who's trying to do similar type stuff, like if you're trying to do conversions, for your home table, is again honoring what the system you're converting it to does and what the intent was in the initial creature, right? Doesn't necessarily matter what the game effect was, but what was the intent of that mechanic? What kind of a moment were they trying to generate, and then try to generate that moment, if that makes sense.
No, that's really good. I mean, I think that's got something similar that Chris Fox and I talked about a lot when we did the Savage Cast podcast years back, was that, on conversions, on just, you're trying to capture the spirit. There isn't really a one-to-one conversion kind of thing because, like as you just said, the gameplay loop in Savage Worlds isn't gain experience through treasure and killing enemies, right? Like, yes, you go and you can loot things and you can kill enemies, but that doesn't give you experience points, right? And it doesn't ratchet up your experience level. I mean, advances are given by the game master, whether routinely or through great effort or every so many sessions. So there's a different assumption on kind of the role that, like a lot, some games, like there's versions of D&D where they really tried to kind of hone in on what level your characters were and then how hard the monsters would be, right? And so they come up with these abstract concepts like CR rating and those kind of things to try to have balance or keep the challenge kind of similar. Savage Worlds doesn't really do that. There isn't, necessarily a monster statted for novice players versus legendary players. There's general guidelines like, hey, so many mooks and so many wild cards per player, depending on what the counter is. But yeah, I mean, it's very different mechanically. So yeah, when you do a translation from one setting to another or one system to another, yeah, go for the spirit, go for what the meta feeling or effect of that monster was supposed to be versus, oh, clearly if the monster has this many hit points, it must have this vigor and this
100%. And one of the things, and I'm actually going to try to pop it open. You might actually have it if you've actually got the PDF open. You might have it easier access because, like a silly boy, I did not open my PDF. But one of the things that I think helps capture the feel of Savage Worlds is one of the setting rules that we created with regards to monsters.
Oh yeah, let me know what page it's on because I don't want to scroll through and
sure
yield.
The setting rules are over on page 50.
Okay.
And yeah, one of them is called Wild World. And the idea is that because the world of Scar and the world of the Savage or of the Scarred Lands is horrendously dangerous. Like it's supposed to be super deadly. Adventurers must be very brave to go out, or either very brave or very dumb to go out into the world. So we have the Wild World setting rule where at the beginning of the combat, the GM can declare any monster a wild card. So you might be fighting like, oh, we're fighting a bunch of goblins and everything's fine, but that one's got a real problem, and then all of a sudden it shifts the dynamic of the combat a little bit. So you can never really walk in as a character and say, oh, well, those are just this thing, those are just that thing. You can almost always be like, that's going to definitely be dangerous. That monster over there is definitely a problem, but you can't just say, oh, they're just kobolds, we'll be fine. So that's cool. And that was part of how, so that was a way that I took like an element that had nothing to actually do directly with creature design and apply it to the creature design to preserve the feel of the world, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I think setting rules is one of those things where I'm a little defensive about how awesome Savage Worlds is, especially on like contentious places like Reddit, where people have spicy opinions and love sharing them. But I think that's one thing when I see people complaining about Savage Worlds, it's like I don't think they as a player or reader got to the point about learning about the setting rules and just how vastly those change the style of play and the feel of play, or how they can. There's just so many ways of tweaking the play there. And again, everyone's heard this. I'll say it again, but like, I love the game. Sean Preston was running a horror game, and the setting rule was you get no more bennies. You start with the ones you have at this setting, and when you run out, you run out. And there's some people had two. They were unlucky, and that vastly changes the expectation of how Savage Worlds work. So calling it swingy and or the Benny flow is too great, it's kind of hard to die if the Benny flow is really high. You kind of have to get a crit fail on your vigor roll, and I mean I've done that way too many times recently in my games. We were playing Tracy Sizemore's Han Cluster, and my robot first roll of the game had a heart attack. I'm like, really robot heart attack. Yeah. John Doom was in the chat. He was running Savage Pathfinder, and he was there. Yeah, James was there. My favorite little Rage Prophet, same thing, critical fail, figure roll, just adios, cry. It's just one of those things where it's like that is fun game design. I think as a creator, having adapted more settings than I've gotten published because of that's another thing too. Is like cough Bureau 13. That was an interesting experience. Working with a prior creator, or at least the license holder, and then doing a bunch of work, and that one didn't make it to market. But the how have you found working with Onyx Path and being able to like, hey guys, can I bring this over to your titular competitor and release it over here? How has that process been for you?
It's been really cool. I mean, I am a contracted long-term freelancer for Onyx Path, so like I have ingrained relationships with the company. But Rich Thomas, the owner and founder of Onyx Path, and by the way, the original creator of Gauntlet of Spiragos, it need be said as well, was very cool as we were discussing it. I've been developing Scarlands for 5e for some time now. So this is a discussion that we've been having off and on for a while about maybe some other ways that we might be able to explore the property, so on and so forth. And when it all came down to it, and I was like, look, I think the best way to do this is, I've got the ACES license. Let me get the license for your IP. We'll see how it goes, and we'll go from there. He said, yeah, that's cool. And has even like, Rich drew the cover. He was one of the artists on like the original first edition Magic. He's been drawing for years and years and years. He was the art director for White Wolf magazine before they were actually a game company. And he did me the solid of drawing the art for the new ready-made characters. So yeah, it's brand new original Rich Thomas art in there as well. So
let's see, are these them?
So those are the ancestry ones, and those were done as part of like the 5th edition player's guide. The penciled sketches that come with your ready-made characters. Those are all Rich. So,
nice, gorgeous.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff, and he really just kind of knocked it all out of the park. Got the feel, got exactly what I wanted him to be like. And like I said, we were able to explore the different ancestries that are available, and in a very cool way, because we have a balance, I think, in this book of like traditional fantasy ancestries, and that there is a playable elf, there's a playable human, but and then an orc, which is rapidly becoming sort of like a traditional fantasy playable character. But then we have the Asathi, which are snake folk, and then the Manticora, which are feline folk, basically. So very, very cool stuff there. Lots of fun.
No, I think that's another thing too. It's like, I mean, no surprise to the folks listening, but putting in, we have a weird industry where the game masters are expected to carry the financial burden and the preparation burden to run games for people. And, from a company side, it's a little scary because it's like 5 out of 6 people who enjoy our products never pay for them or never interact with us as a company. Right. And but from a producer side point, like if you want to publish adventures or publish modules or settings, giving game masters as much done material as possible. And that includes like, the basic playable characters, so they can just literally hand them out to their players, even if they're just like templates for the characters to modify. It's so much easier to, adults and they're trying to find and schedule time and like to not have to do an extended session 2 or 3 nights in a row or whatever, of like figuring out what you want to play and making your characters. And you can just like, boom, here you go. Handouts, here we go. Awesome, let's play. So smart move on that. Excellently done.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So final like tidbit is because you've done it you did it on the monster previews, and then even this big one. And it's a lot of people also forget, like when you do a big thing, you're like, oh, I'm done with the big thing. But you have again smartly included in the final page the next coming soon. So tell us about what are we seeing on the screen now? What is the next coming soon?
So the next coming soon is Dagger of Spiragos. The Gauntlet of Spiragos, as I mentioned, it's a complete story. You can play it and then be like, we won and we're done and we're going to move on with our lives. Or you can pick up the sequel, which is the Dagger of Spiragos. It goes further into the relics left behind by this lesser titan and the role they play in the world and what people might want from them, and sort of drags the PCs into that this network, because you have these remarkably powerful magic items that are now in play, and everybody wants a piece. And of course, there are some people who want the characters to do X, Y, and Z with them, and playing through all that and then figuring all that out. And it explores much more of the Fangs Fall Peninsula region. There are bits of the adventure that take you into the city of Fangs Fall proper, which is expanded on quite a bit in this book. There are other regions around there, swamps of Cantet, things like that, that are which is sort of an ancestral home for the Asath people. That's kind of explored a little bit. So, and then of course, introduction of new creatures. One of the things, and this I think is the first time I'm saying this publicly, one of the things that Dagger of Spiragos contained in its original 5th edition form was a lot of encounter charts for the region. And probably 50% of those were things that were drawn just from the OGL monsters, right? So I've decided to take this opportunity in my infinite wisdom. For some reason, because I'm a sadist, I don't know. I decided to scrub all of those and break out the Scarred Lands creature collections and replace every sort of like, oh, this is just a thing from the monster manual with a Scarred Lands specific creature. So you're going to be getting, I think it's around 70 monsters going to be in this one. On top of course, the story, and then there will be a little appendix in there as well for advancing the ready-made characters if you're carrying them over from Gauntlet. So
awesome. Well, again, folks, I'm going to throw one more time. I'll throw the link in the chat for the Gauntlet of Spiragos. It is available now at DriveThruRPG under $8, which is a steal for a 77-page full-on adventure with characters, with art from the original creators. I mean, a lot of love, a lot of RPG gaming history involved in here. So love to see that it's still a property that's alive and material coming out for it. Thank you for bringing it to Savage Worlds. I know it's a heavy lift to try to do licensing, especially licensing from other RPG companies, right? And
sure.
So no, it's I mean, congratulations on the ample success with your 447 releases on Direct RPG. That's
not to change the subject too much about in that direction, but another book that I worked on, The World Below, from Onyx Path Publishing, just came out on Wednesday, and that is a subterranean horror it's subterranean fantasy with heavy horror elements using the StoryPath Ultra system, and I got to work with Ed Greenwood on that, which was wild. I was Ed and I didn't get to work directly together very much, but I was able to be with, be in a couple calls with him, just talk with him, and just watch him be awesome. So that was fun. So while you're picking up Gauntlet of Spiragos and the Flesh Corruptor and the Blood Raper, you should also grab a copy of The World Below.
Yeah, so link in the chat on that one. The Onyx Path just put it out. Love the cover, very cool. Looks eerily similar to a certain setting Shane worked on with like big spidery creatures and Underdark and cool stuff. So yeah, I mean, hey, it's been a profitable March. Yeah, 2 different things releasing for you. This looks good. This looks fun.
A lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'll actually, when I get done here, I'm gonna be streaming an actual play of it over at the Onyx Path Twitch.
Oh, again, very busy. So yeah, so awesome. So check out The World Below, and any other cool projects in the offing that might be besides Savage Worlds. You want to promo, sneak peek.
So much stuff. So yeah, definitely. If you've not checked out Curseborn yet, Curseborn is the new horror and urban fantasy setting from Onyx Path Publishing. It's a kind of a return to horror. Onyx Path for a long time was licensed out like the 20th anniversary edition World of Darkness games and all that. Well, those things are, sort of coming to the end of the road. So Curseborn is a whole new setting, whole new system. There's an Ashcan edition available right now that's got ready-made characters and an introductory story. And then each month this year we'll be releasing a new monster for Curseborn through our Tasty Bits, which is similar to what I did with the creature profiles that I'm doing for Scarlands. Similar idea. But all these are tied to that ash can. So if you have the ash can and you pick up these Tasty Bits that are coming out, you'll be able to run an ongoing campaign of Curseborn between now and when the book comes out in PDF, which, knock on wood, should be sometime this year. So.
Nice. Most excellent. So well, Travis, thank you for joining us. Congratulations again on all the success. So folks, go out there, pick up some Scarlands for Savage Worlds so we can keep this amazing little licensing deal going. And you got to find out why the Valley of Flies is called the Valley of Flies. And there aren't too many flies there anymore. Now there's giant spiders. But the map is really cool. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So
thank you.
I won't spoil it because it's really cool. But yeah, you can avoid the ravenous hounds, make it to the valley, and that's only in like the first arc. There's like 45 pages after that, so there's plenty of adventure.
Plenty of additional adventure. Yeah, the getting there is only about a third of the fun.
Yeah, right. Surviving or not, dying and having your friends make fun of you for the rest of your life.
That's why I included enough information on the ancestries and cultural packages to create your own character if you need to.
Well, so folks, be sure to check out Travis on the actual play, and then we have our own actual play tonight. Even let's see, like an hour and 10 minutes from now. So go get some dinner, and then come back to Peg Inc. Twitch.tv/Peg Inc. because the Knights of the Smith Dinner Table are doing a necessary evil where you get to play supervillains taking on aliens invasions. A supervillain actual play called Altered Morality. This will be their third or fourth session, so there's some backlog. So check out the YouTube for the history on that, and then tune in tonight to see if they kill Ronnie's character, because that's what I'm putting my money on. Kill Ronnie's character. Anyways, folks, so you got a lot of great stuff to watch. You can go watch Travis. You can come back here. Watch some Altered Reality, and then other than that, we will see you guys next week. JM will be back, and then soon we will do the Swag Awards, where we give out the prizes for the top Savage Worlds Adventure Guild content from 2024. It's time to do that too, so keep an eye out on that. And then I'd be remiss as Mr. Marketing for Pinnacle Entertainment to not mention that we are over on BackerKit. We are doing the Lost Colony Mad World campaign through next Thursday. It's already funded. We're like $30,000 in, which is great. And but yeah, if you want some cool Western in space sci-fi future fighting pestilence this time in that world, go out there and check that campaign out. There's a really good deal, I think over $50 off on, if you haven't played Lost Colony, you can get all the things. So anyways, folks, check it out. We will be back next week with another Savage Universe. Until then, go and play some Savage Worlds or watch it on Twitch. Either way. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
Cheers, folks.